All right, welcome everyone back to Eschatology 301. Before we get started, a couple housekeeping things. Number one, next week is Easter, so we don't typically have Sunday school, so no class next week. And then John and Claudette are going to be away for the next 2 weeks after that, so we're gonna cancel Sunday school for those 2 weeks. That way we can keep recording it. Also just makes sense, today we're going to be having our open forum, and then we're going to be getting into the apostles' teaching. So it makes sense to have just a 3-week little interlude. We still got about 5 or 6 lessons left for this unit, so we'll take a 3-week break. And also, it'll be a good time to give my voice some time to heal. My acid reflux has really been aggravating my throat, so this class might be a little tough for me to get through, but it's not my strength, it's God's strength, so he'll get me through it. And let my voice hold out for that. So today we're going to be continuing our open forum. So this is just going to be free form discussion, time to ask questions, make comments, discuss things, whatever questions are on your mind or whatever topics we want to discuss. We'll just cover that today. So let me go ahead and open us up with a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we just thank you for allowing us to gather here today. We thank you for your word and all of the instructions that you've given us in your word, and just what it reveals about you and who you are. And I just pray that the discussions that we have today will glorify you. I thank you for everyone here and just the Berean spirit that you've placed in each of us to study your word and to desire to understand it and to know what it says, so that way we can glorify you. Pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so let me open it up. Open up the floor. Does anyone have any questions or thoughts? Maybe things you've been studying or looking at and just had questions on or comments? Yes.
I know you have the timeline that you'll put up there sometimes, but could you just I know you have a bunch of key terms, Day of the Lord, Second Coming, and so on and so forth. Could you just kind of from my brain, a little slowly go through all 10 of those things, or however many there are, in order?
Yeah, let me see here. Let me see. Does this? Oh. Yeah, let me pull up the slide. Okay. So I have several terms at the bottom here and then also on the timeline. So I have the Bible references down below where they all come from.
It's hard for me to process. I'm an auditory person. So
okay. But we can go through. So let's start with Daniel 9. So if you have your Bibles and want to turn there, we'll go to Daniel 9. Okay, so the first term I have on there is covenant, and I guess going along with that, the second one, AOD, abomination of desolation. Yeah, I've been using acronyms, so just for space on the slide. So good to redefine those terms. So okay, Daniel 9. So Daniel 9 covers the 77s, or 70 periods, 77-year periods. So it's 490 years total. And the covenant and abomination of desolation come from verse 27, so Daniel 9:27. And he will make a firm covenant with many for 1 week, or 7 years. But in the middle of the week he will put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering. And on the wing of abominations will come one who makes desolate, even until a complete destruction. One that is decreed is poured out on the one who makes desolate. So looking at the first half of that verse, the he here is the Antichrist. So it says that he makes a covenant, or a firm covenant with many. So a lot of times you'll hear this described as a peace treaty. It doesn't necessarily have to be a peace treaty. All peace treaties are covenants, but not all covenants are peace treaties. So it's a little bit more loose than that. It could be a peace treaty. It doesn't have to be. It could be some other covenant. And when you think of say the old covenant, the covenant that God made with Israel, that was like a binding agreement. It was, here's my laws to Israel, you follow these laws, and if you do, I will bless you. If you don't, I'll punish you. And I'll keep punishing you and, escalating as you disobey until eventually you're wiped out from the land. But if you follow my laws, I'll bless you and, everything will be great. So those were the, you think like the terms and conditions that they make you check off and nobody ever reads. That's basically like what it is. That's a covenant. Like, here's the stipulations, the terms. So it says the Antichrist is going to make some sort of covenant. And the language it uses says he makes a firm covenant or a covenant firm. So this could be a pre-existing covenant that he strengthens. I personally believe it's going to be the Mosaic covenant, like he's going to strengthen it and allow the Jews to basically start the sacrifices, build the temple. I think that's all involved here. So I think the covenant he's making firm is basically saying, okay, Israel, I'll protect you. You can go ahead and, and build the temple, start the sacrifices. If any of your enemies try to attack you to stop this, I'll be your defense. That's what I personally believe it's referring to. So that's the covenant. But then it says in the middle of the week, in the middle of the week, he will put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering, which is, again, another reason why I think the sacrificial system is part of this covenant, because it's like he confirms a covenant, but in the middle, he stops it, or he stops the sacrifices. So that kind of like he starts it, but he stops it halfway through. Seems to indicate that the sacrificial system is part of this covenant. And in the middle of the week, this is when he commits the abomination of desolation, which is when he stops or puts a stop to the sacrifices. And I actually should also have Daniel 8 up here, because in Daniel 8 it says, let's see. Yeah, Daniel 8 verse 11. It, again, being the Antichrist, it even magnified itself to be equal with the commander of the host, and it removed the regular sacrifice from him, and the place of his sanctuary was thrown down. And on account of the transgression, the host will be given over to the horn along with the regular sacrifice, and it will fling truth to the ground and perform its will and prosper. So this is speaking to when the Antichrist, again, at the midpoint, he commits the abomination of desolation, where he stops the temple sacrifices and demands that everyone worship him as God. He sets himself up in the temple, proclaiming that he is God. Okay, let's see. What else? Okay, so I'm going to continue along with the first half of the 7-year period there. So I have the birth pains listed next. This comes from Mark 13 and Matthew 24, where Jesus says, you're going to see or hear of false Christs, wars, famines, pestilences, earthquakes in various places. These are the beginning of birth pains. So that's what that's referring to. I also have Antichrist exalted, kind of in that bar in green, up till some unknown point in the second half. That comes from Daniel 11 and 12. So if you turn to Daniel 11, let's see. Yeah, so this comes from Daniel 11, verse 36. Then the king, which is the Antichrist, will do as he pleases, and he will exalt and magnify himself above every god, and will speak monstrous things against the God of gods. And he will prosper until the indignation is finished, for that which is decreed will be done. And then it goes on to say about how he, about other things that the Antichrist will do, and how, again, he continues to exalt and magnify himself. So that's the period where he's exalting himself, and that's going to be important later when we talk about the day of the Lord. So let's see here. Okay, so next we have the Great Tribulation. That's in Matthew 24 and Mark 13, where Jesus says, when you see the abomination of desolation, watch out, because that's when a period of great tribulation is going to occur. It's also in Daniel chapter 12. Now at that time, Michael, the great prince who stands guard over the sons of your people, will arise, and there will be a time of distress such as never occurred since there was a nation until that time. And at that time, your people, everyone who is found written in the book, will be rescued. And then if we, again, go to, say, Matthew 24, let's see. Yeah, therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation, which was spoken of through Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. Then those who are in Judea must flee to the mountains. Whoever is on the rooftop must not go down to get things that are in his house. Whoever is in the field must not turn back to get his cloak. And it continues on. And it says, for then there will be a great tribulation such has not occurred since the beginning of the world until now, nor ever will. So that's the great tribulation, a time of great persecution against the people of God. Now, if we go to that big box there where it says cosmic disturbance, sign of Jesus, and rapture, let's turn to Isaiah chapter 2. Okay, Isaiah chapter 2. Okay, can I get a volunteer to read, since this is a bigger section, Isaiah chapter 2, verses 12 through 22. You got that? Okay, thank you. So before you read that, couple things to point out here. So this is going to describe the day of the Lord. Let's see what else. Yeah, this is going to describe the day of the Lord. And does this have the sign and the sun, moon, and stars? Okay, I don't think this passage is. We'll get to that in a moment. So this is describing the period of time, which is the day of the Lord, where God pours out his wrath on mankind for their sin. So just pay attention to how it describes the day of the Lord, and then also note that God alone is exalted in this day, which is why I believe it has to take place after the midpoint, because the Antichrist is exalting himself during that time, so they can't overlap. If God alone is exalted, the Antichrist can also be exalted. But yeah, go ahead and let's listen to how it describes this time.
The Lord Almighty has a day in store for all the proud and lofty, for all that is exalted, and they will be humbled. For all the cedars of Lebanon, tall and lofty, and all the oaks of Bashan. For all the towering mountains and all the high hills. For every lofty tower and every fortified wall, for every trading ship and every stately vessel. The arrogance of man will be brought low, and the pride of men humbled. The Lord alone will be exalted in that day, and the idols will totally disappear. Men will flee to caves and to rocks, and to holes in the ground, from dread of the Lord and the splendor of his majesty, when he rises to shake the earth. In that day men will throw away to the rodents and bats their idols of silver and idols of gold, which they made to worship. They will flee to caverns in the rocks and to the overhanging crags from the dread of the Lord and the splendor of his majesty when he rises to shake the earth. Stop trusting in man, who has but a breath in his nostrils. Of what account is he?
All right, thank you. Note that this lines up with Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21, particularly people's reactions to the day of the Lord. So like in Matthew 24, verse 30, and then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky, and all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky with power and great glory. And Luke 21 in particular matches this description of people's reactions, or the world's reactions. There will be signs in the sun, moon, and stars, and on the earth dismay among nations, in perplexity at the roaring of the sea and the waves, men fainting in fear in the expectation of things which are coming upon the world, for the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. So notice there are just the parallels with what it says about sinful man's reactions to the day of the Lord and what it says in the New Testament. Now, that's the day of the Lord, but there is a precursor to the day of the Lord, a sign that it's about to occur, which is what I have labeled as cosmic disturbance. This is the sign in the sun, moon, and stars. Basically, the sun, moon, and stars all, well, the descriptively it says, the sun doesn't give its light, the moon turns to blood, and the stars fall from the sky. So everything's going to essentially go dark in the sky. And then that's when Jesus appears in all of his glory for all to see. But in Joel 2, and there's a passage in Isaiah, I forget the reference, I think it's Isaiah 14. But if you turn to Joel 2, Joel 2 talks about the cosmic disturbance. I can find Joel. Here we go. Joel chapter 2. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, Joel 2, starting in verse 30. I will display wonders in the sky and on the earth, blood, fire, and columns of smoke. The sun will be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes. And it will come about that whoever calls on the name of the Lord will be delivered. For on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem there will be those who escape, as the Lord has said, even among the survivors whom the Lord calls. So very clear, it explicitly says that the sun, moon, and stars going dark, that occurs before the day of the Lord. Let's see. Okay. So that's the cosmic disturbance, okay, yeah, let me see. The rapture and sign of Jesus. So the rapture and sign of Jesus we talked about in Matthew 24 and Mark 13. Do you want me to explain that again, or since that was pretty recent?
It was more just everything in chronological order.
Okay.
I was trying to process.
Yeah. Let's see. So yeah, I'll keep going with the chart here. So so there's the day of the Lord, second coming, and then finally at the end there, I have and I'm not going to pronounce it correctly because of my throat, but the G is supposed to be a very throaty G sound, but it's Har-Mogeddon, and in Eschatology 201, we talked about this in Zechariah chapters 12 through 14. In Revelation, it's typically known as Armageddon, but John reverse transliterated that term because he's taking a Hebrew term and sounding it out in Greek letters. So we talked about how there's actually two different ways you could reverse transliterate it based on whether it's a regular G or a throaty G sound, because when you were back then when they were translating Hebrew into Greek, they would translate both G's with the same Greek character for G, because there's not a throaty G in Greek. So if you reverse transliterate it the one way, it's Har meaning Mount, Megiddo, so the place Megiddo, or it could be Har-Mogeddon with a throaty G, which is the mountain of assembly. Moged, it means assembly or congregation, and on means the place of. So it's like the mountain of the place of assembly, which would be a reference to Mount Zion. And I believe that that's I believe that that's what that term is actually referring to. Because when we look at Zechariah, chapters 12 through 14, it describes this, great conflict where God gathers the nations to Mount Zion and Jerusalem to do battle with them, because they're going to try to conquer and take over Jerusalem and God's holy mountain. But then, Jesus intervenes, he steps in, rescues the people. And it even says that he goes back to heaven and comes back with all of his holy ones to destroy the armies that are attacking. And that lines up with Revelation, where it says Jesus appears in the sky on a white horse with the armies of heaven behind him. So I don't believe, when you read Revelation, that's really more of a brief summary statement of Armageddon or Harmageddon. Zechariah 12 through 14 has all of the details of all of the events that happen, because it's not just a singular event where Jesus just appears in the sky and wipes out, the Antichrist army. It's actually a full-on battle with multiple stages. So that's what that's about. And again, if you want more details, definitely watch the video on that. And And then lastly, this period of restoration I have on the side here, that comes from Daniel chapter 12 primarily. Well, Daniel 9 and Daniel 12. So we have the 7-year period, which is the bar in yellow here, split into 3.5 years and 3.5 years. But Daniel 12 tells us that there will be 1,290 days, and there will be 1,335 days. And whoever makes it to the 1,335 day mark is considered blessed. So what I have on the chart here is after the 1,290 days, that's basically when Jesus' kingdom is like fully established. So Jesus comes back at his second coming to establish his kingdom. He's got to do business with the Antichrist, with his kingdom and defeating it. And that's going to be completed at Armageddon when he wipes out the Antichrist and his armies. And then there's going to be a period of time of restoration, gathering. There's going to be a period of restoration where I believe this is where the new heavens and new earth happens. It's basically, kind of the kingdom being established. Any of the nations that are still scattered being brought back. Was also where the sheep and goats judgment would take place. And then after that 1,335 days, that's when the millennium begins. And the new heavens and new earth is set up. And that's why those who make it to that point are considered blessed, because that's when the kingdom kind of officially begins, the inauguration of the kingdom, so to speak, and Jesus' reign on earth. Let's see. Okay, I think that about covers it. Any other questions on that? Yes, question?
I guess we're covered in Revelation because from what I read, there's the tribulation or the millennial reign, and then Satan comes back again and roams the earth for a short period and is finally cast into destruction. Mm-hmm. So Satan would come back and be present and have some kind of dominion in the new heaven and earth. Is that what that would be?
Yeah. So I talked about this when we talked about the new heavens and new earth and millennium back in the Old Testament. So I talk about it more in that video, but I'll cover it here.
We're going to cover Revelation. That's why that was just unusual to me to see.
Right. Yeah, and that was unusual to me. That was unusual to me too. That was a question I struggled with. And actually, let me pull up. I'll just pull up the PowerPoint so I can cover what we talked about. Let's see. See, I think it was this one. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so here I get into kind of why I believe the new heavens and new earth takes place at the start of the millennium. So when you read like Revelation 21, Zechariah 8, Ezekiel 40 to 48, God says that he starts physically dwelling with his people at the start of the millennium and at the start of the new heavens and new earth. So some of these passages are very clearly talking about the new heavens and new earth and say that God starts dwelling with his people. And then some other passages are clearly talking about the millennium and say God starts physically dwelling with his people. So like he can only start physically dwelling with his people once, unless you want to say like he does and then goes away and comes back. So that's a pretty big one. The other thing is that the linguistic and thematic structure of Revelation 19 to 22 allows for the new heavens and new earth to begin at the start of the millennium. So even though the millennium is mentioned first, I believe like that's mentioned in chapter 20. Yeah, because then 21 and 22 are about the new heavens and new earth. Revelation 19 and 20 should actually be a unified section. The thematic element there is the defeat of Jesus' enemies. So it talks about the defeat of the Antichrist's armies, the Antichrist and the false prophet, Satan, and then it's like, well, Jesus also has to defeat Satan and death. But Satan isn't destroyed, and dealt with right when the Antichrist and false prophet are. He's cast into the pit for 1,000 years, and then he comes back and, tries his last stand and then finally gets cast into hell. And then death is defeated after that. So really that's kind of, talking specifically about the defeat of Jesus' enemies. There's a bit of a gap there because of the millennium. But then when you get to chapter 21, I believe that starts a new section that backtracks a bit. But yeah, so, and then, yeah, question?
No, that's okay.
Okay.
Because 21 starts with then I saw the new heavens
Yes.
and the new earth, which seems to be a chronological time sequence.
Yes.
But you,
Yeah, because it could be then as in chronologically, or it could be then as in like that vision stopped and now there's a new vision. So yeah, it could be either or. Yeah, and then other Bible passages in the Old Testament seem to describe the new heavens and new earth and millennium, kind of characteristics of them all mixed together. And it's kind of like when I read commentaries on it, it's kind of picky and choosy as to like, oh, well, we know what the new heavens and new earth is like, and these conditions can't be there on the new heavens and new earth, so it has to be describing the millennium, and we know what the millennium is like, so it can't be talking about the new heavens and new earth. And it seems kind of presupposition-y, like as to what verses people applied to which. Okay, so then, yeah, the question is, how can Satan be present on the new heavens and new earth for a short time? Because that's kind of weird, and it's a question I had. Well, one thing we have to consider is that Satan has access to heaven now, which is where God dwells. So even like when we die or believers die and go to heaven, like Satan is there too sometimes. So, we think about heaven being a perfect place, but even Satan has access to heaven right now. Satan's presence doesn't corrupt heaven now, even though he's evil and has access to there. We still consider heaven, to be leagues better than here on earth. So I think that, yeah, like Satan can be present on the new heavens and new earth because, he can be present in heaven now. But then the other thing too is, well, yeah, that's another question. How can there be no curse if sin is still present? There was sin for a very short time before the curse because, Adam and Eve sinned, and then, they went and hid for a couple hours, and then, God shows up and talks to them, and then when he punishes them, that's when he curses the earth. So there was sin for a very short period of time before the curse. The other thing is that sin doesn't cause the curse. God does, and you read that in Romans 8:20. He can remove that particular punishment for sin even if sin is still present. So sin isn't responsible for the curse. The curse is God's punishment because of sin. Yeah, how can there be sin and death on the new earth? Because again, with the Gog-Magog war, there's going to be a bunch of people that rebel against God and get killed because of that. Let me see here. Yeah, so matter is not permanently corrupted because sinful beings or a sinful being touches it. The law of Moses gave instructions for cleansing after something was desecrated. For example, the temple was cleansed after Antiochus committed an abomination of desolation. So that was like the near fulfillment of the abomination of desolation. So whenever the temple was desecrated or any other objects in the temple, there was cleansing that had to be done to make them fit for worship again. Matter can be cleansed. And in Ezekiel 39, it talks about how 7 months after the millennium, the people are going to be cleansing the land of the dead bodies. And the question would be like, well, why would they need to do that? If the Gog-Magog war happens, and there's 7 months after well, I guess there's a short time after the millennium that Satan's around. But then there's going to be 7 months where they're cleansing the land. Why would they need to do that if the new heavens and new earth happens? Wouldn't Gog-Magog war happens, Great White Throne Judgment, new heavens and new earth? Why would they need to spend 7 months cleaning, cleansing the land of the dead bodies that defiled it? It's again something interesting to think about. I think God has it in here because the land can be cleansed even after sinful people are killed on it. Although the one point I do want to make here is that sin and death will definitely not be present in the New Jerusalem, because Revelation 22 is very clear about that no evil thing enters the New Jerusalem. So, that city will be fully protected and isolated from sin and death. Let's see, I think, yeah. So that's all the kind of the questions I had as I was going through, well, wait a minute, if you put the new heavens and new earth before the millennium, like what does that mean about some of these other things? So
You've had the same questions I did, so
Yeah.
thank you for reviewing that.
sure. Yes, question.
Not sure how to ask this question, but at some point, people are no longer going to be new. There's going to be no longer births, right?
Yeah, that's what I believe. That it does kind of,
We are
because there's not going to be death.
beings,
Mm-hmm.
and so at some point, and there's not marriage in the new heaven and new earth. So when does that happen?
Yeah, that's something where like the precise details of that I'm a little fuzzy on, because I can tell you what I do know for sure. So there are going to be Gentile nations that survive the day of the Lord. They don't side with, or Gentile people, I should say. They don't side with the Antichrist. They miss the rapture. They make it to the sheep and goats judgment. So, Jesus, separates the sheep and the goats. The goats are cast into hell. The sheep enter the millennium. And at that point, as far as I can tell, they're still mortal, still capable of producing offspring, and they're going to have to be to repopulate the earth and continue the growth of the nations. And I think, again, when you look at like Revelation 22, and it talks about washing your robes to partake of the tree of life, I think that there is a literal sense that is true, where there's kind of like that outward expression of I'm washing my clothes to show that I've put my faith in Jesus, and I wish to submit to him and have him as Lord and seek forgiveness for my sins. And then it's like, okay, you can come in and eat from the tree of life, and when you eat from it, that's when like those mortals become immortal. So I don't know exactly how that all works. Like, will people be mortal for a while to have children and then partake from the tree of life and get their their immortal bodies? Because obviously the believers that were raised are raised to their resurrected bodies and raptured, so they won't be producing offspring.
Yeah, it's not really spelled out anywhere that I can think of, but I always kind of assume that when the new heavens, the time of the creation of the new heavens and earth, not creation, but the occurrence
Yeah.
of the new heavens and new earth, that was in the time when
When
there
it
was a
stopped.
slight break, and everyone became at that point immortal. We got our immortal bodies. Now, those of us that have died, they became immortal first, but. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense, because that's how I interpreted it. Like, again, the group of Christians and Old Testament believers that were raptured, like they're already in their resurrected bodies, and then people live basically a long time during the millennium, and at the new heavens and new earth, like that's when they would get their resurrected bodies or immortal bodies as well. But yeah, like when you put the new heaven and the new earth at the start of the millennium, you don't really have that, which is again why I kind of think, and again, I don't have all the details really fully worked out there with that one. It's still a little bit unclear to me how that works, but again, I think there's something with actually eating from the tree of life that like will make people immortal. And so I don't know if it's more of like a gradual thing where over time in the millennium, people will be, mortals will be partaking from the tree of life, and it'll be more of a gradual thing. And then, obviously once death is defeated, there's going to be no more death after that, at the great white throne judgment. And at that time, will like everybody be immortal then? And then will it just kind of gradually fade out where like you don't have any more mortal people capable of producing offspring? So at that point, everyone's immortal and that's it. Could be, I don't know for sure.
Okay.
Yes, question?
Take it like all the way back to now. Like what are we looking for? Like for all of this to start, what are we waiting for now?
Okay.
What
Yeah.
are we gonna see or?
Okay, yeah, good question. Let me see how much time. Okay, yeah, so let me go to Revelation. Let's see, Revelation, I think it's 18, 17 or 18. Okay. Yeah, Revelation 17. I'll start in verse 9. I believe that the very next thing that has to happen on the prophetic table is what's described here. So here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads, and this is the 7-headed 10-horned beast it's talking about. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits, and they are 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, and the other it has not yet come. And when he comes, he must remain a little while. So again, we've talked about heads and horns before and how they're kingdoms. So it says here that 5 kingdoms have fallen. So in John's day, that would be Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, and Greece. Those are the 5 that have fallen. 1 is, that would be Rome. And the 7th one has not yet come. And I believe that the 7th one has not come even today. But it says, but when he comes, he must remain a little while. So this 7th kingdom, or kingdom, whatever it is not going to be around for a very long time. It's not going to be like Rome that lasted, hundreds and hundreds of years. The beast which was and is not is himself also an 8th and is one of the 7, and he goes to destruction. The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but they receive authority as kings with the beast for 1 hour. These have one purpose, that they give their power and authority to the beast. So I believe that this 7th kingdom that's going to come about is going to be made up to start with of these 10 smaller kingdoms. So it's going to be like a confederacy of sorts, where you have 10 nations, kingdoms ruled by 10 kings that band together. And that's going to be the start of the 7th kingdom entirely. And like the other kingdoms that came before it, it's going to be somewhere around the Mediterranean Sea, control the land around there. It's going to subjugate and oppress Israel. So I believe that Israel will actually be conquered by this 7th kingdom. But it also says that this 7th kingdom is also an 8th. And we also learn from Daniel 7 that the Antichrist comes to power after the 10 kings are already in place. So I believe, again, you need the 7th kingdom with 10 kings first. Then the Antichrist is going to come to power. And because Israel's being oppressed at that time, that's basically what triggers him to say, hey, I'll protect you, rebuild the temple, start the sacrifices, let's do this. The 10 kings aren't going to like that. It says in Daniel 7 that he uproots 3 of them. So he's going to basically defeat 3 of them through war and conquest. And then the rest are going to capitulate to him. And that's when it says here that they give their power to him. And that's when this kingdom kind of becomes an 8th, because it's fundamentally changed at that point. It was ruled by the 10 kings, but then the Antichrist basically takes it over and conquers it. And it's still kind of the 7th, but it's kind of a new thing. Which is why it kind of says it's a 7th and an 8th sort of. Why the language is a little fuzzy, because conquests and kingdoms and histories of nations are complicated things, which is why one of the reasons I think the Bible describes it in these terms is because it's not always straightforward. The history of a nation. You think of the Roman Empire and how it was strong. Iron strong empire, but then it split into 2, and the one side was weak, and so nations and such change over time. But yeah, I think the rise of the 10 kings as the 7th kingdom is the next event. Yeah. Let's see, we probably have time for one more question. Is there anything else? All right, well, if not, then we can go ahead and wrap up here. But I'll give one more opportunity, just any questions. All right, sounds like that's it for now then. Yeah, so again, just to recap, we're not going to have Sunday school for the next 3 weeks. Next week is Easter, and then John and Claudette are away for 2 weeks. So just that way we can record things. We're not going to have Sunday school for the next 3 weeks. For your assignment for between now and then is to go ahead and read 1 Thessalonians chapters 4 and 5. And again, pray for the right attitude, apply the right hermeneutic. And of course, since we have 3 weeks' time, as you're reading 1 Thessalonians chapters 4 and 5, go back and look at what Jesus said in the New Testament or in the Gospels, the different chapters we covered. Go and see how they compare. See if what Paul is talking about is the same thing that what Jesus is talking about. And of course, go back and look at the Old Testament too if they're mentioning any things like, you need a refresher on like the abomination of desolation or the new heavens and new earth, the day of the Lord, things like that. So, of course, we have all the videos up. So if you need to pull those up and have a quick refresher, you can do that. So come prepared in a couple weeks, and we'll look at the apostles' teachings and what Paul has to say in 1 Thessalonians chapters 4 and 5. So with that, I'll go ahead and close us out with a word of prayer. Dear Father, I just thank you for the discussions we had here. I thank you for the great questions. I just thank you for everyone's desire to learn and to understand your word. And I just pray that, we'll all continue to do that. I don't want anyone to take my words for it. I always want your word to be what is first and foremost, and for everyone to take it on themselves to study it and to understand it. So I just pray that we'll have that spirit to do so. And of course, we do all this because we love you, and we want to know we want to know how we can best show our love for you. So I just pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.